Their support for this long-awaited rededication, and I want to thank Elias Goodside for believing in this effort for many, many years. You know, this was first proposed in 2003 when the new building was built. I proposed it, and it didn't get very far, but it takes people of action and people of faith who really understand what this community needs. To the end of my days, I will be a son of Mount Vernon, New York. I am a South Sider and grew up in and around this neighborhood we call the Educational Park. We used to call it School 14. This is where we played sandlot football, and as a boys club Pop Warner football player, this was our practice field right back out here. My entire K-12 education was provided by our public school system. It did a good job on me. The schools and teachers and staff nurtured me and sent me on life's journey as a professional historian. From fifth grade to the present, history has always been my passion and what I always wanted to do. Mount Vernon schools have been good to me. Okay. That's okay, because it's been good to a lot of people. As a kid, from humble beginnings at Leverton Towers to my current position at Morehouse College, I've always been thinking about Mount Vernon, these 4 square miles. What makes it so unique? I've had many memorable teachers in our school system. I am so honored and proud to stand here as your speaker today. In 1983, I was awarded a PhD in American history. My professors had great hopes and expectations for me in the academy. However, I had a different plan for my life. I was determined to use my doctoral training at Mount Vernon High School. Yes, a PhD going back to a local high school? They couldn't talk me out of it. To the dismay of my doctoral committee, I declined assistant professorships at a host of small New England liberal arts colleges and came home to Mount Vernon and accepted a position as a social studies teacher at Mount Vernon High School out on California Road. A decision I've never regretted. In my spare time and summers and school holidays, I began researching and writing about our local history. In 1984, while in the Mount Vernon Public Library, I came across a 1963 retrospective Daily Argus story. Those of you who don't know Daily Argus, that's our former newspaper. We won't talk about them today. It was about a 1933 land foreclosure along Eastchester Creek, across from Pelham, near the Bronx and Mount Vernon border. The article stated that from 1818 until 1906, the disputed land in question allegedly belonged to, and I'm going to say this, Benjamin Turner, a Negro squatter. That's all it said. Benjamin Turner, a Negro squatter. I read the clipping several times, and there was something unsettling about the tone of the news article. The writer was making fun of the idea of a Negro owning land on the banks of Eastchester Creek. The land was affiliated with a grant from King James, the former Duke of York, from whom we get New York. It was part of a royal tract passed on to his daughter, Her Majesty Queen Anne of England, who gave it to the second generation of the original settlers of Eastchester, which is now part of Mount Vernon, New York. My question was, what in heavens would Benjamin Turner, a Negro, have to do with British kings and queens and the founding and the founding local pilgrims of this community. As a young historian, I intuitively believed that there was more to this story. Something fishy was going on here. So for the next 2 weeks in 1984, I began searching for the who, what, why, when, where of Benjamin Turner's life. In fact, another local historian told me that Benjamin Turner was not a Negro. I said, okay. Her rationale was that in 1818 there could not have been a Negro living on or owning land that close to St. Paul's Church and the Village Green. That's a term the students need to learn, the Village Green. That's what, right in front of St. Paul's Church, that was called the Village Green. That was like the center of the town. That's where you posted notices on the church door. That's where people got punished for crimes. It was the center of the community. And Ben lived right near there. Her rationale was strange to me. She told me that Benjamin Turner was probably not black. The doubtful historian told me that my pursuit of the Turner story was not worth the effort, and the story had no credibility, and proving it was an impossible task. For that historian, the Benjamin and Rebecca Turner story, as we have come to know it, was a fantasy and a fable. It was just too good to be true. That was 30 years ago. Sometimes you have to go with a historical hunch. All I had was a name, his race, and his questionable occupancy and ownership of a piece of choice real estate. That's all I had. There were many unanswered questions. This is how my 3-decade-long quest to resolve the Benjamin and Rebecca Turner mystery began. They were dead. They were buried. They were obscured. They were out of sight. No one knew anything about them. Weeks of part-time research rolled into months, years, and decades. The genealogical and historical work was conducted long before the digital era of Ancestry.com. The fundamental and foundational documents were scratched out the old-fashioned way, from one dusty archive and a single paper document at a time. The recovery of the name of Benjamin's wife, Rebecca Turner, was the key to unraveling this epic story of their lives and extended family, as well as the unlocking of the mystery and invisibility of the black community in colonial and early Eastchester. I had no idea that it would consume my personal and professional life in the way it has. There have been dozens of nights and days when I questioned myself and often decide to quit and let someone else pick up where I left off and finish writing these missing African-American pages of our public history. But I could not let go because the ancestors wouldn't let me. The ancestors, Benjamin and Rebecca, and especially their granddaughter, whose name we should all come to know. Her name was Sarah Elizabeth, I call her Libby Nelson. And I'm sure all the students will get to know her name over time. Sarah Elizabeth Nelson. I call her Libby. She was my girlfriend. She died in 1941, born in 1852. Because she would come to me and talk to me about this story. And my wife knew it. She was cool with it. I kept a journal next to my bed at night because when I ran into a brick wall on this story, she would say, oh, no, look here, look there. And I believe to this day that that was her mission in life. I can't talk about her today because it's a huge story. And so she would not rest until I finished my life's mission to tell this great, triumphant, and tragic story. It's an American story of captive New Yorkers moving from slavery to freedom, to land ownership and full citizenship. Today, I propose to this distinguished assembly that the critical ingredient in modern public and social history is its capacity to resurrect neglected, lost, and long forgotten peoples entombed in earthen and archival burial grounds. Bring them into new historical life. Let us consider the timeline of Benjamin and Rebecca Turner. Ben and Becky, as I call them, were born before and during the American Revolution. Benjamin died in 1832. Rebecca died in 1872. But Rebecca witnessed the Civil War and the national abolition of slavery. Sarah, or Libby Nelson, born in 1852, lived through World War I, the 1930s Great Depression, and died in 1941, 4 months before Pearl Harbor and our onset into World War II. The three Turner Nelsons spanned every American president from George Washington to Franklin Delano Roosevelt. They are authentic Americans who also made their contributions to rural, suburban, and urban Eastchester and Mount Vernon. There is a Pelham school named Anne Hutchinson who lived between 1591 and 1643, and for whom the river and parkway are named. If you survey citizens as to who she was and what was her legacy, you would be surprised by the number of people who still do not know her contributions to local history. What we have today is not just an obligation to rename and rebuild an elementary, middle school curricula, but we have the opportunity to know that we are fortunate to have a rich body of documented research and a major historical treasure at our back door. St. Paul's Church and Cemetery National Historic Site, which both Ben and Rebecca were intimately connected, is in our back door. It is a national treasure. We're about maybe 200 yards from there right now. So today, this is more than a renaming of two schools. It is also the formal ritual of the resurrection of the lives of Benjamin and Rebecca Turner into historical life. We're going to raise the dead, you're right. We're involved in miracle work, you know. It is also a down payment on the reparations due to them on the unethical taking of their homestead and land by the city of Mount Vernon. This is a new beginning. As we recognize and celebrate the renaming of these two schools, we are doing something that many said would never happen. This family of former African captives and later land-owning freedmen is not merely an African-American story, but be sure it is a great American story. I come today to say thank you to the decades of believers, those who saw the fragments of documentary truth slowly emerge to become a beautiful mosaic portrait of a New York town, city, and county that had no place in the history books of our city. So before I go any further, I want to thank the doubters and the naysayers. The kids say the haters, you know. Because they have had to come around over a long period of time to realize that this is an important, not just Mount Vernon story, but a national really important story. There will be great national attention given to this project. And after 30 years, I feel like a prophet now. So take my word for it. You can take it to the bank. Today is a milestone in the Renaissance of Mount Vernon schools. This occasion represents tangible evidence of a new sense of maturation about teaching and learning in our city. I am so glad to be here to take part in this great renaming ceremony and celebration. We have chosen a long-forgotten family of enslaved residents that rose from New York slavery into freedom through interracial cooperation, hard work, moral decency, land ownership, and faith in their Almighty God. The Turners, in spite of slavery and discrimination, successfully embraced the American creed of equal access to life, liberty, and opportunities to prosper. Their story is not just an African American story, but also a great New York story. As of today, we know more about the Turner Nelsons than most white families from our community. We are now responsible to continue to study and teach and learn about the times and conditions in which they lived in these 4 square miles. According to New York State educational policies, we are obligated to talk about those who came around, who lived here, down by the creek, St. Paul's Church, and along Boston Post Road. They are part of our local history. And finally, the educational and community services spin-offs from the resurrection of Ben and Becky, they are enormous. Eastchester Creek interconnected their lives with the once beautiful and bucolic environment of this town. It has been polluted, scarred, defaced, and damaged by runaway urbanization, industrialization, and human abuse. You would not want to put your toe in Eastchester Creek. You'd be afraid it would fall off. As the students breathe new life into this early American black family, it will be confronted with the death and destruction of the river and its tributary we call Eastchester Creek. This environmental disaster extends out into the once fertile wetlands, reaching out into Eastchester Bay and Pelham Bay, where we now see Co-op City sitting on top of those former wetlands. They will have to develop, these students will have to develop concern and confront our neighborhood's past environmental splendor. Once with lush forests and waterways full of fish and oysters and lobster. Students will not only look at the past lives of Ben and Becky, but the present ecological and environmental condition of the land and stream near their former homestead. We here at Longfellow, now Turner Education, we are in the heart of all of this historical and environmental potential to make a difference, not only in Mount Vernon, but in the county, but in the state, and of course, our nation. Turner Educational Park students, listen to me carefully, teachers, can take their STEM education to new levels of engagement as junior environmental scientists and activists. Their youthful voices echoing the lost found Turner family and people of African descent living and laboring right here, even before there was a United States of America. Even before there was a sovereign state of New York, and definitely before there was a city of Mount Vernon. Their efforts here will be a powerful indication of a new surge of effective teaching and learning in our city. This is just the beginning of an exciting time to be a teacher, a student, an educational leader down by the creek in Mount Vernon. So let us fully embrace the Turner story with all of its complexities, and it will distinguish these two schools and our school district as centers of educational excellence. Today is the formal beginning of a new day, a rebirth, a renaissance of the Mount Vernon School District. And God bless you.